Welcome on in, Dragon Folk. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I know I am. My name is Ashen Wings, and today we are going to be going over the Dragons of Dromai. So, obviously, I like Dromai a lot. There are a few videos here on the channel where I talk about Dromai, and I wanted to make some more beginner stuff to kind of talk about the dragons that are in the deck, as well as ones that you may want to avoid during certain builds. Maybe you're playing something more aggro. Maybe you're something more of a control deck. Maybe you're a deck that's able to produce a lot of resources very fast. These are the decks that you're normally going to want to figure out what dragons you're going to run if you're actually running a dragon build. So I'm going to go over all of the dragons that are in the Uprising set, other than the Ashwing, which is pretty self-explanatory. But if you bought a Blitz deck that is for Dromai, you will notice that none of these dragons will be in your deck. That is simply because I think they wanted to just kind of give you a base idea of how to summon dragons such as Ashwings, as opposed to giving you a more in-depth look at the sheer diversity of abilities that Dromai can essentially push out. So we're going to look at the first dragon, probably one of the most important dragons. These first, 4 or 5 dragons, really 6, I think. First 5 dragons are all, incredibly necessary, right? And we'll talk about them as we go. So the first dragon we have here is Invoke Chromai. Invoke Chromai, obviously, is a 0 cost dragon, so it costs nothing to play. You are still, of course, going to need a Ash available to play Chromai. And then, once you play Chromai, you are able to use, their ability coming in here. I'm going to show off all the Marvel versions, because those are the coolest ones you can find. But Chromai here has 3 power, or 3 attack, and 2 health. So, only 2 health, a pretty weak dragon in comparison. But the cool part about Chromai is that when you attack with Chromai, you get an action point. And so getting an action point is very important if you are, by any chance, going to be going up against a guardian or even a wizard that may be able to destroy your dragon on your turn, right? Essentially getting rid of any go again you might have with your dragons. Chromai gets you an action point when it attacks or when it leaves the arena. So essentially, you get the action point for attacking, and then if it leaves the arena, you get another action point. So if this is popped, you get additional action points as well on top of it. So Chromai is pretty powerful, right? Coming in for 3 is a pretty basic rate for an attack, and it costs 0. So it's essentially a 0 for 3 with 2 health. And it doesn't normally stay on the field for very long, but it is a very, very important dragon and is included in every single dragon-based build for Dromai. This is a auto-include. You're going to want 3 of these. I promise you it is very, very important. The next dragon is also an auto-include, and that is none other than Asvalai. Asvalai is another 0-cost dragon. All of the dragons are also red pitch, by the way, so it is very important to note that you are going to be playing a decent amount of reds, usually. And Invoke Asvalai, again, same deal. It blocks for 3, and that's the other cool thing. All of the dragons block for 3, so that is really, really nice. Invoke Asvalai is a pretty awesome dragon, right? First and foremost, the art's amazing, right? But second off, what it does is when it attacks, it comes in for 2 physical, but it also comes in for 1 arcane to up to any 2 targets. So, for instance, if you're attacking a hero that doesn't have any other ally or anything, you can attack the hero for 1 arcane and then come in for 2 physical and don't choose a second target. If you're playing against another Dromai, for instance, you can come in and attack the Dromai for 2 and then give 1 arcane damage to both of the, let's say they have 2 Ashwings out, which only have 1 health. Then you can go ahead and kill both those Ashwings and then still threaten damage to your opponent. So Asvalai allows you to essentially give multiple targets damage as well as come in for 2 physical. So 2 physical damage, but also 3 health. So a lot more, 1 more health than Dromai here. But still, again, an auto include. Because for those decks who are not running Arcane Barrier into you, you're going to be able to get some additional free damage. This thing practically comes in for 3 and has 3 health if they're not running any Arcane. And then on the best case scenario, right, if they are in fact pitching for the Arcane, then they lose a card for it, which is pretty great in your favor. Then we're going to move on to another auto-include into every deck. I would say it's an auto-include. You don't really need it, but I do like it a lot. This is a 1-cost dragon. So we're off of the 0-cost dragons. We're onto the 1-cost dragons. And this one is Invoke Yendurai. Invoke Yendurai, of course, blocks for 3 in your hand, but when you transform it through summoning it or invoking it, you get Yendurai here with 3 attack and 3 health. Yendurai also is pretty neat in regards to the fact that it has an endurance counter, which means that technically, unless your opponent can bypass any prevented damage, this has 6 life as opposed to 3 life. Because if Yendurai would be dealt damage, remove an endurance counter from him to prevent 3 of that damage. Now, you're going to see a lot of people, you're going to see people attack Yendurai for maybe 1 damage while it's got that endurance counter on it. And if it attacks it for 1 damage, the endurance counter goes away. If it attacks it for 2 damage, the endurance counter goes away. It does not have to be 3 exact damage, so it is not 3 additional life. It is essentially just a way to prevent the first hit worth of damage to Yendurai. But Yendurai, again, another way to... These 1-cost dragons are very, very important in the fact that they allow you to go Ash neutral. That means that when you play something like Invoke Yendurai for the one resource that it costs to play it, what you'll do normally is you'll pitch a red card, something like, normally you're not pitching dragons, but even if you're pitching a Invoke Asvali, what this does is it means that you lose an Ash for summoning Yendurai, but you gain an Ash for pitching a red, which means that in theory, you don't lose an Ash. Both of these dragons here, Asvali and Dromai, are dragons that make you go Ash negative. Ash negative means that it just costs an Ash to play them. So they're not free, they still cost you a resource, being that Ash token. So Yendurai is a great kind of card to just chill out, right? Hang out there. Your opponent will probably end up having to use 2 cards to kill it, or if it's a Guardian, they're able to come in with 6 power attacks and just kill this dragon. But overall, it is another dragon. It's an Ash neutral dragon, and it can block the first 3 damage coming into it, so your opponent may need to use more cards to get rid of it than one normally would, which is important because you want to try to strip as many cards as you can from your opponent's hand. And it's like a diversion, like if 2 attacks are going to Yendurai, that's 2 less attacks that are going to you. So keep that in mind. The next dragon we're going to be talking about is Invoke Miragai. Miragai is a very, very important dragon. It is always run in every deck, 3 copies, all the time. If you're playing dragons, you're playing Miragai. Because, again, it's a Ash neutral dragon, so you can pitch a red. You can pitch blue for these, which make them Ash negative, but normally you're pitching reds. Invoke Miragai is a pretty amazing dragon here in the fact that you get such a amazing ability to remove Phantasm from your first dragon attack. So normally, right, all of these dragons will have an Ash under them. That Ash will give all of these dragons Phantasm, which means that if your opponent has a card with 6 or more power that is a non-illusionist attack, it can block one of these dragons and that will pop it, which means it will destroy it and essentially end the combat chain in that regard. But with Miragai allows your first dragon attack to bypass that and be able to threaten its damage. It does also come in for 2 attack and 4 health, so obviously a higher health pool as we go up the ladder here. It's tanky enough to the point where they would have to usually use a breakpoint attack to destroy it, right? Maybe a weapon or even just like a snatch or something to kill Miragai. That is going to be very, very important in regards to that, because usually if your stuff comes in for 3, it's not going to kill Miragai. This thing's got 4 health, which means they're going to have to either do 2 cards to kill Miragai, or one of their more powerful, 0 for 4s or 1 for 4 breakpoint cards to kill Miragai instead. So Miragai allows you to bypass that phantasm stuff. So if you're going against a lot of Guardians, you're going to want to make sure that you have Miragai and some other dragon out, normally probably one of these guys, which we'll go over later. And then that way you can guarantee that your damage is going to be threatened and that your opponent is going to have to block. Otherwise, they will reap the consequences of ignoring your dragons. Now we're going to move on to the last 1-cost dragon, being Invoke Kyloria. Kyloria is a pretty awesome dragon. Again, another auto-include into every single dragon-based deck. This is it's just an amazing dragon in the fact that it allows you to have such great options, right? It comes in for 4, which is a breakpoint. 4 damage is a breakpoint, which is very, very good. It does also only have 2 health, which is a little unfortunate because that means that it is very susceptible to death. 2 is not hard for a lot of people to get out. And again, you can't block any of your dragons, so this thing's just going to die. But the cool thing is that you end up getting things like Miragai out, and then you can play Kyloria. Kyloria will then come in without Phantasm. Kyloria's ability reads, when Kyloria hits a hero, gain control of an item they control. If you don't gain control of an item this way, draw a card. So essentially how that works is if your opponent is a mechanologist, right? And mechanologists can choose to start their game with an item, or they will be able to be making items throughout the course of the game. Kyloria can take them, which really hinders their game plan, right? This is normally something that they wait for you to attack with this, and then they block it out entirely, or they try to pop it, which is why Miragai is so important. It also takes any potions your opponent may be using, so things like energy potions or timestamp potions. It just takes them, right? Silver from those assassins, it's able to take the silver. If your opponent is running royal anything, it takes the gold token from them. Very, very cool. So that's only if it takes an item, right? The other cool thing is that if they don't control an item, you get to draw a card. So this is essentially Snatch, but a dragon. So very, very cool. Definitely one of the more powerhouse cards. I would say if there are 4 dragons you're running in an aggro build of Dromai, it's Chromai, Asvalai, Miragai, and Kyloria. Those are like the 4 that you're going to want 3 of all the time. Yenderai is also available if you want to add more dragons in there, but normally a lot of these dragons here are all replaced by like zero cost cards that come in for 4 damage. So that's where there's a little discrepancy, but overall, Kyloria is a great dragon. You're going to want to definitely keep that one in the pocket. This is a great one to keep for late game when you're trying to get some additional cards, or to even threaten early game stuff, because Kyloria is it's a threat. It's a threat in general. Your opponent is going to want to block this, or they're going to want to pop it. Getting damage off is it does not work out in their favor. The next dragon we're talking about is Invoke Mai. So Invoke Mai is a 2-cost dragon. This one is very situational, okay? Incredibly situational. I would not run this in the main board ever. I would only ever run this in the sideboard if you're running dragons. And that is specifically because, 1, it's an expensive dragon for 2, right? You'd have to pitch 2 red or a blue or a yellow or something to end up actually using its ability, or to summon it, I should say. But Mai has a really, really cool, very passive ability of just saying opponents can't play cards or activate abilities during your turn. So Mai works really, really well against 1 hero type and 1 hero type only. Wizards. Wizards really are the only thing that they're doing a lot of stuff. Like they are just playing stuff on your turn all the time, and Thamai shuts them down. Thamai has 4 health, which means that they're going to have to dedicate a pretty high powered arcane card to destroy it, something like Aether Ice Vein, or I think even an Aether Dart isn't too bad of a deal there, to kill Thamai. But pretty much stopping your opponents from being able to play cards on your turn are pretty good. This also works out well if your opponent's playing like a very, very big, what do you call it? Kind of like a defensive strategy with Sigil of Solace and Oasis Respite, right? This is very, very good. So being able to block that stuff is good. It also cannot, if I recall correctly, it actually stops defense reactions too. So, but normally this is only really run in wizard matchups. So don't worry too much about that. But Thamai is pretty good as far as that is. It comes in for 3 attack, 4 health. It gets the job done when it needs to, you know. The next dragon is Invoke Uva. Invoke Uva is a pretty awesome dragon. It's a little polarizing though, because Invoke Uva, while it is really good, it is very, very harsh on your Ash generation. Because not only do you have to pay 2 to play Invoke Uva, which is normally a blue or 2 reds, to make the, to summon Uva, but Uva makes Ash Wings. Their whole thing is they make a ton of Ash Wings. So at the start of your turn, or when Uva enters the arena, transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Aether Ash Wing. So if you end up generating a ton of Ash and you're just not sure what to do with it, Invoke Uva is great because at the beginning of your turn, as long as Uva is alive, you can just turn one of those Ash into a dragon. And eventually that will bring your board super wide and you won't have a problem trying to overpower those people. But the problem is that Uva only has 6 health and has 1 attack. So you're really never attacking with Uva unless you are absolutely certain that your opponent doesn't have a popper or anything of that kind. But having 6, it's still within range of things like Guardian. Even, Dorinthia is able to get additional counters onto her Dawnblade because she can attack for 3 with her Dawnblade, and then she can attack again and get a +1 counter on her Dawnblade. So the higher health dragons are actually kind of a bane for you if you're going into a Dorinthia matchup, or somebody who likes to do a lot of on-hits. So having that is unfortunate, and of course only making 1 Ashwing, it's good if you're trying to build up things like Arcane Barrier, but overall, Uva, you're normally only running 1 of this card in a deck. Because 1 is really all you need. If you play 1, you're at least able to get 1 Ashwing. Maybe you're able to get a value of a couple more Ashwings if you have the Ash for it. But the problem is it eats up your Ash a lot. And so if you are not playing this late game, it is very, very difficult to just play this in the beginning of your turns when you have no Ash, and then just run out of Ash. And so when you get something like Kyloria or Miragai or Asvali, you don't have any Ash to play those dragons, and so you're essentially just stuck with those in your hand. Of course, you can transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Aether Ashwing. So if you so choose, you do not have to make an Ashwing. So, like I said, always keep 1 Ash floating, and you'll be okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. We're going to move into the 3-cost dragons. First, we're going to look at Invoke Nekria. Invoke Nekria being a absolutely gnarly looking dragon, right? Blocks for 3, and it costs 3 resources. So you're usually pitching a blue for this, or you're pitching a red. Just as a heads up, these are the higher cost dragons here, and these are the legendary ones we'll go over in a sec. But the higher cost dragons, if you're running these in your deck, you're going to want to run more blues. Not more blues than reds, but you're going to want to run more blues going into these matchups, because paying for 3, not only are you going to go Ash negative, because you're probably going to play a blue, or pitch a blue to play this. And if you don't have any resources to play this, it's essentially just a dead draw, right? You can't really do much in regards to this. You're probably never going to get three red cards into the pitch, using Flamescale Furnace or something to have 3 float to play Nekria. So you're definitely going to want to just make sure that you're running blues if you're playing Nekria. But the good news is that while Uvia has a thing with making a ton of Ash Wings and using up a lot of your Ash, Nekria is a fantastic way to generate Ash. So if you ever find yourself not having enough Ash throughout the game, Nekria is a great way to alleviate that. Simply because Nekria's ability is whenever Nekria deals or is dealt damage, put a -1 health counter on her and create an Ash token. So while it is very, very interesting how she makes the Ash, obviously dealing damage brings her health down. Being dealt damage brings her health down even more. But she does come in for 4 health, or 4 attack, sorry. So she comes in for 4 attack, and it's, again, another breakpoint, which a lot of people like to see. What some people don't know about Nekria, though, and this is kind of a beginner tip for those of you who might not know, when Nekria is dealt the damage, the -1 counter comes off, right? And that's just how that works. So if your opponent attacks Nekria with a 6 power attack, obviously 6 is less than 7, so you're going, okay, cool, well, it will survive. Well, when Nekria is dealt damage, they get that -1 counter that will kill Nekria. So essentially, add 1 to every single attack that comes into attack Nekria, because they're going to get that additional counter off. Now, of course, if you're lucky enough for your opponent to like Kadachi, Crouching Tiger, and Nekria or something, then you're going to get a lot of Ash off of that. Or even if you get a lot of hits off with Nekria, you're going to be able to get a lot of value from Nekria. But normally this is there in case you are having trouble making Ash. So for instance, if maybe you used a lot of these early on in the game, or you're going Ash negative because you're pitching blues for big dragons, or maybe you have to pitch a blue for a Kyloria or a Miragai or something because you want to summon 2 dragons on 1 turn. Nekria definitely helps with that because Nekria is able to make that Ash. And also, fun fact, for those of you who may not know, this is a pro tip. Not really a pro tip because I'm no pro. But if you attack with Asvali again says that you can have him deal 1 arcane damage to up to any 2 targets. That includes your own targets, which means you can attack your opponent and you can also attack Nekria. So that arcane damage will come in, hit Nekria. Nekria will go down to 5 health, technically, and then be brought back up to 6 at the end of the turn because Nekria regains her life other than the -1 health counters. So that allows you to get an additional Ash whenever you attack with Asvali. So if you're looking to generate more and more Ash on your turn to summon more dragons, that is a way to do it. Now let's move on to everybody's favorite. If you're running blues, if you're running a very, very intense aggro phantasm-esque build, you're running Invoke Sarakai. Invoke Sarakai is a 3-cost dragon, and Sarakai is a powerhouse. I'm talking a sheer powerhouse. Sarakai not only has I would say, the coolest art out of all of the dragons, mind you, other than the legendaries, but Sarakai does 6 damage, 6 attack. It only has 1 HP, so it is very, very weak. But it comes in for 6 damage, and then whenever Sarakai hits a hero, he deals 3 arcane damage to them. So Sarakai essentially threatens 9 damage if they do not block, if your opponent does not block. This is very, very terrifying. And having something like Miragai out, playing Sarakai essentially allows you to come in for 6. It's like playing a Command and Conquer. Come in for 6, and then threaten 3 additional damage if any of it gets hit, or if it hits at all. So it is a very powerful dragon, but unfortunately this dragon does not survive on the field very long. So expect it to be kind of like a fireball, right? Like it's coming in for 6 plus 3 arcane. If you happen to get some damage off, great. But this thing is probably going to die next turn. So make sure to just be aware of how low its HP is. All right, so we went over the main deck dragons. Like I had said, normally in a more basic aggro build, you're probably just playing Chromai, Asvalai, Miragai, and Kyloria. In a more control-ish build, you may be playing something like Nekrias as well, and Yendurai, and maybe one Uvia, three Sarakai, and maybe like two Thamai on the sideboard in case you're going up against a wizard, right? You can use all of these, and they're all rare, right? These versions are Marvel, so like you're not going to find these for cheap. But the rare version, right? It's just like a rarity, like the rare rarity. They're all very cheap to get. So getting 3 copies of each, I highly suggest. They're very, very easy to get. Most people consider them bulk, so you could probably pick them up for next to nothing to upgrade your Blitz deck for Dromai. But now we're going to go ahead and talk about the 3 legendary dragons and what they do. As you can see, we started with 0-cost dragons, moved into the 1-cost dragons, then into the 2-cost dragons and the 3-cost dragons. So as they get stronger and stronger, they cost more as well. So let's first look at Invoke Dominion. Invoke Dominion, it costs 4 resources and has a pretty awesome ability. Normally you're pitching 1 red and 3 in a blue, right, for 4 resources, maybe even 2 yellows if you're playing like Tome of Yendal. Maybe you're pitching 2 blues if you really need to, but as long as you have the ash for it, you're good. Invoke Dominion is a crazy good legendary. I think it is probably one of the most expensive legendary ones out there right now, simply because it is very easy to get out. Normally, most people block with this card and don't ever get it summoned, which is kind of funny. But when you can get Dominion out on a turn, this helps you a lot, especially if your opponent's not playing a lot of poppers. Or maybe they are setting themselves up for a very, very powerful turn. Because Dominion's ability is whenever Dominion attacks a hero, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a red card, look at their hand and banish a card from it. So that will allow you to see if they have a popper in their hand. If they have multiple poppers, just check to see what their combo piece is. Banish that card. So then they can do not anywhere near as much damage on their next turn. So that obviously there's several heroes, and I will go over the matchups later on in regards to Dromai, but you'll know what cards to look for in a hand if you know they're trying to set up for something. So Dominion also comes in for 4 attack and has 4 health, so 4 health still being that breakpoint average, so not very tanky as far as the dragon goes, but is still incredibly powerful as far as its effect. So this is why you're going to want to run more reds than blues, but you're still going to want to run blues if you're running Dominion, because, well, how else are you going to summon Dominion, right? Like you're not pitching 4 reds for a Dominion unless you have Dominion in Arsenal. And even still, it's not like a value hand, I don't think. Next up, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite. I think it's also my favorite dragon aesthetically, but everybody's favorite dragon, Invoke Tomaltai. Mr. Tummy Trouble, whatever the heck people are calling him, right? Invoke Tomaltai costs 5 resources, so this could either be 2 blues or a yellow and a blue, or 2 reds and a blue to summon Invoke Tomaltai, right? And he has such an incredible ability of not construct Nitrid Mechanoid. Tomaltai here is so cool because it comes in for 5 attack, has 5 health, and has the ability of whenever Tomaltai attacks a hero, reveal the top 2 cards of your deck. If 1 or more red cards are revealed this way, put that many -1 counters on any equipment they control. Then, if it has 0 defense counters, destroy it. So this is a way for you to destroy your opponent's equipment early. So for instance, if your opponent needs to, they rely on their Spellbound Creepers for their Runeblade stuff, you can destroy Spellbound Creepers. Even if you flip over the top 2 cards of your deck and one's a blue and one's a red, normally you can get rid of their Findel Spring Tunic, which is a great resource management tool for them. You also can get rid of Null Rune Boots. Null Rune Boots are a pretty great target for Tomaltai, and I can make a whole video on what you're going to want to target as far as every hero for Tomaltai. But normally, it's once you know more about the equipment loadouts for other heroes, you know what to target and what really is the big problem here. And in most cases, you're getting rid of their arcane barrier so that they cannot pitch anything for when you play Burn Them Alls or for when you come in with an Asvali and attack with any of arcane there. You, of course, also can get rid of any of their big combo pieces like a Courage of Bladehold or, I don't know, Helm of the Sharp Eye, maybe even something like Refraction Bolters. Like there's I'm just talking about Guardian stuff there, but you're going to want to go after that stuff. But of course, you get to choose after you reveal. So you reveal the top 2, and then you choose what equipment to put those counters on. So obviously, if you flip 2, you're going to get 2 -2 counters. So you're going to want to target something that might have more defense, right? If it's important to their game plan, right? Whatever's important to their game plan, even if it's more than that, you're going to want to make sure to disrupt them before they can use those armor pieces, essentially. And then we move on to the final dragon here, the strongest of them all, Invoke Dracona Optima. Dracona Optima has also, again, super sick art. Comes in for 6 resources. 6 resources. So you're going to need 2 blues for sure. 2 blues. You're not running any yellows. So, like, except for like Toma Findalls, right? But you're not going to pitch 3 Toma Findalls for this. You're going to pitch 2 blues. 2 blues for Dracona Optima. Most people don't actually run this one because of how expensive it is. Because most of your dragons only get to go once. Right? Normally, unless like, your opponent decides to ignore your dragons, normally your dragons are only going to stay out in the field once. They're only going to get 1 time to shine, and then that's going to be it. Because your opponent's going to go, well, I don't want to do that again. And then they will kill that dragon, right? So Dracona Optima comes in for 6. It comes in for 6 attack and has 6 health. So beefy dragon with a lot of damage. Again, 6 is a lot to come in for. Then, not to mention that whenever Dracona Optima attacks a hero, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. He deals arcane damage equal to twice the number of red cards revealed this way to them or an ally they control. So, again, this looks for 1 red card. Tomaltai looks for 2 red cards. Dracona Optima looks for 3 red cards. The more red cards you get from the top of your deck, the better his ability becomes. And this way, if your opponent is going to pop them, for instance, then you can at least be able to deal a hopeful 6 arcane damage to them, which is still enough damage to be worth it in the end of the day. So, a fantastic dragon. All of these dragons are pretty cool. Something that is not shown on here, it's actually shown on the other side of these cards. Something for those of you to note. This is a legendary invocation to transform a chosen ash you possess into Tomaltai and then get go again. So these dragons, these 3 specifically, these 3 legendary dragons, you can only have 1 of in the deck. So while you can have 3 of any of these dragons up here in a deck, you can only have 1 of each of these. So make sure to use them wisely when you have them. There's so much, as you can tell, there's so much diversity as far as these dragons go, and you're really able to get a lot out of building a deck, right? You want something more tanky and control based, right? Maybe just waiting for that phantasm negation. Invoke Sarakai come in for a lot of damage, right? Thamai to stop all of the wizards from being able to do stuff, or maybe even to stop people from playing Sink Belows or any of their defense reactions on your turn. You also have Yenderai and Asvali and Chromai, right? More specifically, these 2, which will help you generate resources or generate action points and then also present arcane damage on top of it. Miragai is probably one of your most important dragons due to the phantasm nature of the entire deck. And, I mean, they're just great, right? Like, they're just fantastic cards. So, I definitely suggest that if you picked up Dromai in a Blitz deck, that you should absolutely pick up these cards. The Non-Marvel versions should be pretty cheap for all of these rare dragons. They're practically considered bulk. These are majestics, not rares. So these will be a little bit more expensive, but I don't think it's by much. I think Dracona, Optima, and Tomaltai are usually they're like a couple bucks here and there. Dominia, though, I think last I checked was going for like $10. But luckily, again, you only need one. So getting a Dominia, even just to start, or a Tomaltai to start, you're going to be doing pretty good. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you learned something today as far as these dragons go. I know there's a lot of different ways to build Dromai, what dragons to add, what dragons to take out. There's still so much, new stuff coming into Flesh and Blood that this deck could flip around 8 ways to Sunday. I'm imagining there's going to come a day where there's going to be a dragon that on hit is going to create a frostbite. But don't quote me on that, right? That's going to be probably banned almost immediately if that happens to be the case. So let me know in the comments down below whether or not you learned anything today, whether or not you have a favorite dragon, maybe one that you've really enjoyed the art for, or maybe one that you really connect with. The other cool thing for those of you lore heads is that all of these dragons are based in certain parts of the world. So for instance, right, Dromai is a Metrix dragon. Yenderai is from the Savage Lands. Miragai is from Mysteria. Kyloria is from the Pits. Nekria is from the Demonastery. Sarakai is from Volcor. So there's like a lot. They're all over the world. This is essentially like the lore builder's deck, if you would. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It was very fun to make, and I hope it was informative enough to everybody. If you want to kind of know more about how Dromai works, you can check out some of my other videos on about learning the basics, as well as the Flamescale Furnace tutorial that I have for everybody. And hopefully I can continue to educate everybody on the world of dragons. And, maybe I'll see you at a big event playing Dromai herself. So thank you all so much. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and I will see you all very soon. Nerd out.